Why hello there beautiful people, Caz the Blackheart back with another Baltimore State Dynasty video here on NCAA Football 14, and we are at our Week 5 bye week after coming off a big win over Illinois. We're sitting at 3-1 on the season with a disappointing loss against Alabama in Week 3, and with the transfers that came as a result of the sanctions posted against Baltimore State in the offseason, this team still has plenty of building to do. And with that in mind, this video is going to be all about the players that we're looking at as far as recruiting goes this season. Now, if you guys don't remember or are completely unfamiliar with the list of sanctions from this offseason, as of now, Baltimore State has lost 15 scholarships for the next 3 seasons. So basically, we lose 5 scholarships this year. We're only able to sign 20 players overall. One thing I completely forgot about is we're actually not allowed to have any official player visits this season, and we've done a bunch of those. So for this season, at least, I'll eliminate it, and I'll just put it against us for the next 3 seasons after this year. We can only recruit in the state of Maryland and any of the bordering states, so that's Virginia, Delaware, DC, even though DC is not actually a state, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania for the next 3 seasons, and we can only redshirt 5 players this season as well. So let's take a look at some of the players that we're looking at. Right now we're looking at Albert Melton out of Frederick, Maryland. He's 6'1", 274, and is the 33rd ranked guard in the nation. Currently he's looking at Baltimore State, Navy, Maryland, UConn, and Virginia Tech, with the 3 Maryland schools being his main targets as of right now. And sure enough, proximity to home seems to be the main factor in him playing for a school next year, although playing time is very important, and he'll definitely get plenty of that with Baltimore State's offensive line not being very good. Program tradition is also very important. We're a C in program tradition despite winning 3 national championships in a row. Maybe he doesn't really like the sanctions that were placed against the team, but he's definitely interested in coming to Baltimore State to play football next season. He is a bit of a hidden gem. He's currently at 78 overall after being 70 overall when we first looked at him, and his pass blocking and run blocking is pretty astounding. His impact blocking leaves a bit to be desired, but his strength is really good at 87, and his acceleration at 92 definitely makes him very attractive as far as pulling plays go, such as power or trap plays. So once again, this was a guy that I forgot about the visiting restriction, so those will be sanctioned over the next 3 seasons instead of this year. So basically we get an extra year because we didn't follow the rules as far as that goes, but he did visit us in Week 4 when we beat Illinois, and he still has visits with Navy, Maryland, and UConn to go. Virginia Tech and Old Dominion are pretty much out of the running for the most part, as he looks to stay closer to the state of Maryland. Next up, we look at Jermaine Malone, who's also a guard out of Milford Mill, Maryland, and he's the 28th ranked guard in the nation. He's a 3-star prospect, and currently he's only taking Baltimore State and Maryland seriously, another guy who wants to stay close to home. And he's a big fan of what Baltimore State has to offer him. Conference prestige, we're at an A+, even though we're not in the ACC currently. Proximity to home's an A, and pro potential is also an A as well, as Baltimore State may have fallen off as far as talent goes with all the transfers, but Baltimore State remains a pretty good pipeline for pro talent, as NFL scouts still come out to the games, so Malone definitely is attracted to that. He's currently a 73 overall, not quite as talented as Melton, but he is a better impact blocker and slightly worse at pass blocking, run blocking, strength, and acceleration. Still a pretty good guard prospect that we could definitely still bring in to play opposite of Melton. And currently, he's only really taking Baltimore State and Maryland seriously. Kentucky and Vanderbilt were both looking to bring him in, but they've fallen out of the race at this point. And Maryland has already visited with him, and they had a really good visit. And Baltimore State will have a visit in Week 12, so they should have a pretty good shot at pulling Malone in as well as Melton. With Baltimore State missing a lot of athletes from their roster currently, they're looking at bringing in John Harper out of Aberdeen, Maryland. He's the 55th ranked athlete in the nation, sitting at 5'10", 203 pounds, and he's looking at a lot of East Coast teams. Of course, Baltimore State #1 for him right now. Maryland, Rutgers, Virginia Tech, and Navy also in the running for him. And currently his main factors are proximity to home. Obviously, Baltimore is in Maryland, so Aberdeen's pretty close to Baltimore. That's an A for him. Program tradition, again, Baltimore State a C. And conference prestige, of course, Baltimore State is heading back to the ACC after 2 years, so that's pretty high as of right now as well. Harper's pretty talented at pretty much any position that you want to put him at, as his speed is an 89, acceleration is an 87, agility is an 81, 75 jumping, and his tackling is 62, so you could play some defense as well, especially with that 86 man coverage and the 80 zone coverage. He definitely could play some running back as well, although his carrying is a little low for what I'd like to see, as is his ball carrier vision. But there aren't too many limits on what he can do, and he could probably end up being a kick returner for Baltimore State next season. Currently, Baltimore State is in the lead, although none of the schools that he's looking at right now have offered him scholarships. But Maryland, Rutgers, Virginia Tech, and Navy have all pretty much fallen out of the running for him. Nobody's established a visit quite yet, so he's pretty much open game for any of these schools if they want to jump back into the race. But Baltimore State currently in the lead, and it's looking like he's going to be a Stallion as well next year. Next up, we're looking at Walter Snow. He's 6'2", 255, out of Baltimore, Maryland, the 100th ranked defensive end in the nation. Currently, Old Dominion holds a slight lead over Baltimore State, but Middle Tennessee State's right there as well. And don't count out Rutgers or Western Kentucky, although they've pretty much fallen out of the race for him. Although Charles McCray isn't with the team anymore, Walter Snow is a big fan of Coach Gibson, as we have a B+ in coach prestige. He's currently an A in proximity to home. Maybe he doesn't want to play too close to Baltimore. And he's a C+ as far as championship contender goes, because let's face it, Baltimore State's not going to be contending for the national championship anytime soon with how weak their roster is right now. Snow is more of an edge rusher, so he'd play outside linebacker in a 3-4 defense, but he's not the quickest guy in the world, but he's pretty strong at 85 strength. He'll have to work on his speed if he really wants to stick with any team that he plays for, but that block shedding at an 85 is looking pretty good, and his overall is a 69. Giggity. Baltimore State does have a visit with him in Week 9, although Old Dominion and Middle Tennessee State also have visits with him, but Rutgers, Western Kentucky, Navy, and West Virginia have all pretty much fallen out of the race for him. So it's really a 3-school race between Old Dominion, Baltimore State, and Middle Tennessee State. Next up, we got Johnson Johnson out of Richmond, Virginia. He's 5'10", 213 pounds, and is a 3-star receiver, ranked 114th in the nation. Currently, he's looking at Virginia, Maryland, and Baltimore State, although Wake Forest and Duke still somewhat in the conversation, but pretty much getting blown out in this race. Johnson's looking at proximity to home, where we're a B+, conference prestige, which is an A+ for Baltimore State, and C, program tradition. That's not very good for Baltimore State. Virginia is also not currently a pipeline state, although that should change in the next few seasons, so we don't get any bonus points for that. And overall, Johnson's not really that great as far as receiving goes. His catching traffic is really disgusting at 45, but he's an 80 catching, 85 speed, 85 agility, and 85 acceleration. And his route running could be a bit better. It's sitting at 60 right now, but he's definitely a project player and definitely somebody who could help out Baltimore State right away. Next, we're looking at Rico Harper out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He's 6'2", 197 pounds, and is a 4-star prospect. Even at 68 overall, he's the 15th ranked wide receiver in the nation. He's more of a possession receiver, and he's currently looking at Toledo, Pittsburgh, Penn State, and Old Dominion, in addition to Baltimore State. Baltimore State does have a sizable lead over the other 4 teams in contention, but his bonus factors don't really benefit Baltimore State all that much, as proximity to home is a B+, but playing style is a D-, and program tradition is a C for him. So it's pretty surprising to see Baltimore State have a 1,000-point lead over other teams that are closer to him. His speed's pretty good at 92, and his agility and acceleration are both at 88, but he's pretty average down the board on everything else, and his catching isn't very good at 55. Route running's at 70, releases at 70 as well. along with a lot of his rushing attributes as well, like trucking, break tackles, stiff arm, and all that. So he could play running back for Baltimore State if they needed him to. Next up, we're going to look at Ray Johnson. No relation to Ray William Johnson, by the way. He's 6'2", 190 pounds out of Washington, D.C., and is a 3-star prospect, the 39th ranked cornerback in the nation. And he's got a lot of elite schools looking at him: Florida State, Oregon, Miami, and Stanford, along with Baltimore State. He's not really too big on Baltimore State as a championship contender, but he loves their athletic facilities, and he likes the pro potential that the team gives him. And as far as attributes go, he's a 93 acceleration, his speed's at 88, his agility is at 78, which is kind of cause for concern, and his man coverage is not very good at 76, but he's pretty good in zone, so maybe he could play some safety, except for the fact that his tackling's at 55, and his play recognition is at 68, so a lot of issues with Johnson, but he's a raw talent, and hopefully we can develop him into being a solid defensive back of some sort. Whether that's a corner or a safety, we'll have to see. He's also looking at schools like North Carolina, USC, Ole Miss, and Penn State as well. And Baltimore State seems to be the only school that's really pursuing him as of right now, but don't be too surprised if one of these schools decide to go after him and swoop him out of the arms of Baltimore State. Next up, we're taking a look at Parker Mansfield, the 46th ranked free safety in the nation, sitting at 5'11", 183 pounds out of Fort Washington, Maryland. He is a 3-star prospect, and Baltimore State is in the lead for him as well, with Minnesota, Miami of Ohio, Virginia Tech, and Texas all dragging up the rear. Mansfield isn't a big fan of the program tradition in Baltimore State, and it doesn't look like he's going to get much playing time with the likes of Roman Cinder and Alex Ace sticking around for the next few years. But he is a fan of the ACC, so maybe Baltimore State will be able to convince him to come through, because they are moving back to the ACC more than likely in the next 2 years. Mansfield has 90 speed, but his agility and acceleration don't really match that, as they're both at 70. He has 85 hit power, which is really impressive, and his zone coverage is sitting at 75, but his man coverage isn't very good at 65, so don't expect him to cover too many tight ends or running backs out of the backfield. He'll mostly be used in zone coverage, usually playing the deep middle third in cover 3, or the left side in a cover 2. I don't really expect to play him too much in main coverage. And currently, Baltimore State is the only team to offer him a scholarship, and the only team really actively pursuing him, so I fully expect Baltimore State to end up signing him. Whether or not he plays next year is a completely different story, but we'll have to see how he develops. Another player Baltimore State's looking at right now is Steve Nelson, the JUCO out of Highland Acres, Delaware. He's the 186th ranked cornerback in the nation, sitting at 6'0", 179 pounds, but he's only a 1-star prospect, and currently Baltimore State, Old Dominion, Rutgers, Western Kentucky, and Middle Tennessee State are in the running for him. Currently, he's a B+ as far as coaching prestige and proximity to home go, but as is the case with Parker Mansfield, he's not a big fan of how much playing time he'll get with Baltimore State, which looks to be the undoing of the team if they don't sign him. He's got 90 speed, 89 agility, and 86 acceleration to go along with 83 jumping, but his play recognition could be a little bit better. His tackling isn't very good, neither is his hit power or pursuit, and his coverage could definitely be better as well. He's only a 75 man coverage, 76 press, and 73 zone coverage, and don't expect too much success with blitzes, as he's a 53 block shedding as well. Duke is the 6th team in the mix, but nobody really seems to be pursuing him too much outside of Baltimore State, so he's another player that they could look to sign this offseason. We got another notable player in Xavier Hobart out of Reading, Pennsylvania. He is the younger brother of Baltimore State tight end Zach Hobart. He's a 3-star prospect, 31st middle linebacker in the nation, sitting at 6'3", 225 pounds. Currently, Syracuse is in the lead for him, as Baltimore State trails by 860 points. Temple, Bowling Green, and Ohio are also looking at him as of right now. Currently, Hobart's a B+ as far as proximity to home goes, but he's not a big fan of Baltimore State's playing style. But conference prestige is an A+ as of right now. And Hobart's a pretty good linebacker. He's pretty athletic with 85 speed, agility, and acceleration, which is pretty good for a linebacker. His man coverage and zone coverage is impressive at 80 each, but his tackling could be a lot better at 70. Hit power's at 70 as well, and his pursuit definitely leaves a lot to be desired at 50, and his play recognition is at 65. So he definitely has a lot of room for improvement. Hobart has a lot of teams looking at him right now. 5 teams, including Syracuse, who is in the lead for him, have offered him scholarships, but he's only really considering Baltimore State, Syracuse, and Temple as of right now. We're also taking a look at Jax Lewis out of Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore State currently in the lead for the 6'4", 250-pound linebacker. He's 85th in the nation as far as linebackers go, or middle linebackers go, that is. UConn, Memphis, Toledo, and Eastern Michigan have also had some interest in him, but it doesn't look like he's going to pick anybody over Baltimore State. He loves the proximity to home and the athletic facilities, but he's not a big fan of how much playing time he could get at middle linebacker, which might deter him from signing with the team. Lewis has 85 speed, which is pretty good, but his acceleration and agility is sitting at 70, with his strength at 60, which isn't very ideal for a middle linebacker. His tackling is a lot better than Hobart's, however, at 85, but his pursuit and play recognition, along with his man coverage skill, all are pretty disappointing, so he definitely has a lot of room for improvement before Baltimore State really considers him for any kind of playing time. Baltimore State's the only team to offer him a scholarship, so it's looking like he's probably going to stay in the city of Baltimore for his college career. Next up, we got Eric Reed out of Chantilly, Virginia. He's the 77th ranked cornerback in the nation. 3-star prospect, sitting at 5'11", 186 pounds. He's mainly considering Baltimore State, Maryland, and Iowa, although Arkansas State and Kentucky are also in the running for him. Baltimore State does have an A+ as far as conference prestige with him, but program tradition and playing time, he's not a big fan of Baltimore State as far as those are concerned, and that might cost them a chance to sign him. And corner is a huge need, honestly, but Maryland or Iowa might end up swooping in and taking Reed from Baltimore State. He has 87 speed, 79 agility, and 85 acceleration, so he's not the fastest corner in the league, but he does have some hops at 86 jumping. His tackling could be a little bit better, as could his play recognition, but what really scares me off of Reed is his man coverage skill at 72. We might end up moving him to safety if he does end up signing with Baltimore State, but he does have a lot of room to improve if he does stick at corner. Baltimore State and Maryland are really the only 2 teams with much interest in him, as Iowa's kind of fallen off, and Maryland's the only team to offer him a scholarship so far, though Baltimore State definitely could offer him a scholarship relatively soon if they decide that he's a good fit at corner or safety for him. Although Kevin Pratt has looked pretty good as a starter for Baltimore State, they're definitely looking towards signing another quarterback. John Holt from Bon Air, Virginia is who they're looking at right now. 6'1", 216 pounds, the 43rd ranked quarterback in the nation, and a 3-star prospect. Currently, Baltimore State and Wake Forest are really the only 2 teams giving him much consideration, although Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, and Kentucky are also in the race as well. Holt loves the conference prestige and the pro potential of going to Baltimore State, but playing time, not so much, as he's a D-. Julius Hobbs and Kevin Pratt are just better options at quarterback for Baltimore State, but Holt could be a good selection if Baltimore State decides to recruit him for the future. Baltimore State hasn't really scouted him too much, but outside of good throwing power, it doesn't really look like Holt has much to bring to the table. He's not a scrambler in the slightest, and he's just another pocket quarterback, can't really play any other positions on the field. So if they bring in Holt, he's going to have an uphill battle if he wants to get any playing time for Baltimore State in the future. Baltimore State currently has the lead over Wake Forest. It doesn't really look like anybody outside of those 2 is really interested in Holt, which could be a bit of a red flag, honestly. With him being a 69 overall and being unscouted, could Baltimore State be making a mistake in going after him? We'll have to see. Next up, we got Quintarius Mathis out of Baltimore, Maryland. He's 6'6", 210 pounds. He's a 2-star prospect, but the 216th wide receiver in the nation, which isn't very good, but Ohio State, Kansas State, Oregon, and Pitt have also taken a look at him as well. A Baltimore native, proximity to home is looking really good, as are the athletic facilities as far as Mathis goes, but he doesn't think he'll get a whole lot of playing time, and that kind of discourages him, although Baltimore State has the most interest in him, so he might be pigeonholed with going to Baltimore State if he wants to play football next year. For a 6'6" guy, he has pretty good speed and agility and acceleration, but jumping isn't one of his strong points. Neither are route running or catching for the most part. He's a 70 at catching, spectacular catching traffic, and his route running is sitting at 50, which isn't very good. So he's another guy that will be a work in progress if Baltimore State decides to sign him. And it's looking like they will, as they're the only team really giving him any type of consideration, and they're the only team to offer him a scholarship. So it's looking like Mathis will be a part of the Baltimore State program next season. And last but not least, we take a look at Jeremy Landrum out of Idlewood, Virginia. He's 6'2", 306 pounds, and a 3-star prospect, the 42nd ranked defensive tackle in the nation. And Baltimore State has a pretty close race with Virginia Tech and Old Dominion, although they currently lead by about 210 points. Kentucky and Vanderbilt were also in the race for a little bit, but they seem to have fallen off. And he's a pretty big fan of the conference prestige of Baltimore State going back to the ACC, or if they go to a different conference, we'll have to see what happens with that. But pro potential is an A as well, and proximity to home is a B+, as Idlewood isn't too far from Baltimore, so his family will definitely be able to make the trip to go see him play football, which is a big thing to him. Landrum is more of an interior pass rusher, but he's definitely built like a nose guard, and he's not a very fast player. 57 speed, 57 agility, and 78 acceleration. Strength could be a bit better as well at 71, but his power moves are at a 79, which is his biggest asset, and his finesse moves are 73, block shedding 71. He could improve in all of those spots, but so far he's looking pretty good. And if Baltimore State wants a good shot at signing him, they're going to have to offer him a scholarship, as Virginia Tech and Old Dominion, two schools that are much closer to him than Baltimore State is, have already offered him scholarships, so they're going to have to get from behind the 8 ball and do so if they want to bring him into the program. So that's going to do it for this recruiting special. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comment section which recruit you're really interested in. Also, let me know if there's a position that you think I should address in recruiting that I haven't already. Thank you guys so much once again. Make sure you guys hit that like button, hit the sub button if you're new as well, and you guys have yourselves a wonderful rest of your day and night whenever you're watching this. Like I always say, guys, no matter what happens, make sure you keep that mofo rolling, and I'm out of here. Deuces.